Okay. As you can see, if I've handed out, has everybody got a handout who wants a handout? I have more. Okay. I'm going to do some oldies but goodies, some substitutes that you might want to try in your garden, as well as some, we're not quite sure, or at least one, on what it's going to do in the long term, but I think it's going to have some decent foliage. And we're going to go around through the garden. We're going to go way down that direction. We're going to work our way back up actually through this area here. So we're going to bypass some things and then come back to them and then work up into the garden a little bit. So I have the list of 12 plants in advance so you can take notes of what I might actually say. I have no clue. I'll give you some insight on some plants. Some are, like I said, some that you probably might even have in your own garden or have something similar to them in your own garden. So we're going to take a little bit of a trek to get to our first plant. And like I said, then we'll work our way back. So we're going to get started and we're going to go down this direction. So our first plant, I think most everybody's here now and hopefully can hear me, is the maple that's right behind me. And here's a leaf from it. And they're all over the ground in here, among some other plants in here, but most of them are these. This is Acer skutchii. So what's significant about this is a Mexican Central American species of sugar maple. And it's quite rare. It's disjunct. They think it was pushed down to the south during, I think it was the Pleistocene, I read. I didn't write that down on here, but and it's been separated from all the other sugar maples for like 9,000 or 10,000 years. Some will lump this into the saccharum and they'll put it as a subspecies or variety of skutchii, or that is, call it a variety instead of a species, but they're now saying pretty much they think it's a species. It's been separated for long enough, but it's quite interesting because it's from so far south and it's from a quite different setting. It's from cloud forest, actually. In the population, there's only like 5 or 6 populations I've identified of it in the wild. Some of them are in northeastern Mexico and then way down in the southern Mexico and then into Guatemala. There's a couple locations there. So very different from what we're accustomed to seeing sugar maples here in the eastern United States. Most of them occur up in the northeast. We do have like Florida maple, and there's a couple other smaller species of sugar maple that we have here in the southeast. So what this is probably going to be good for us is because it's from so far south, it's quite heat tolerant, it's very drought tolerant, and what's the issue nowadays? Global climate change, and we're getting hotter and drier. So, and the genes from this could be a great plant to include in your landscape. It's faster growing than a traditional sugar maple too. This was planted, I didn't even look to see when I planted it, but I remember planting it, I believe in 2008 is when this was stuck in here. And it was probably, if I remember correctly, it was about yay big. It was not very large when we planted this. At least let me make sure. I'm pretty sure it's in that range. We got this. Oh, my number's not on there anymore. It's worn off. But 8 or 9 is when I stuck this in here. So it's been in here. This is an unirrigated part of the garden. And it was in those years that we had drought, so 7, 8, 9, we had real dry years, no problem. And so it got good selection there, but it has grown very vigorously. It's a little later to color than traditional sugar maples, but it still does color up, and this will give us a good display here. They're thinking of using this a lot more like in Louisiana and Texas, and I probably got this from Dr. David Creech from Stephen F. Austin University is where I believe we got this one from. If not, he's one who's a big proponent of this species and has been spreading it around. But it's a really good one to try if you can locate this plant. Similar colors, again, to the traditional sugar maples with the oranges and yellows, the warm tones, not the pinks and reds that you get on like red maple. So, but just coming up. Oh, and if you look up, I was wondering, I don't see any in the ground, but it is known, oh, there are some here, for having some of the largest samaras of any maple. So these don't seem too enormous, but these are pretty good sized. And if you look up, there's a ton of them up there. So that was something that was noted about this species. Any question?
Can it syrup or you have to be up?
That I don't know. You might get better quality is my guess further north, but I don't know, to tell you the truth.
So what are samaras?
Oh, samaras, okay. You know, the whirligigs. In this case, it's the wing is a samara, the samara on this. The seed, it's used in a dispersal, so this is the samara.
So when the leaves fall, they can fall?
Yeah, and these will actually, they may fall beforehand. It depends on the species of maple when they are produced too. So some wait and do it in the fall, some do it earlier in the season. I don't know, is this actually, I wonder if it's viable. Because we only have the one plant, I'm not sure how the viability will be on these. The embryo doesn't look too hot on these, so I'm probably not going to have these coming up from seed everywhere, but unless it outcrosses with another maple, a sugar maple around here. But any other questions? I didn't pay attention to that, but like I said, this has been here since about 2008. So I'm going to guess that it's going to get taller. I mean, it should be similar to a traditional sugar maple. I'm going to guess 60 to 80 feet long term.
Don't some of the southeastern ones?
They're going to be much more compact, yeah. But this, I think, takes after more of your traditional sugar maple that you're going to see up north and size-wise. So
you're growing it in gravel.
This is the permatil's on top. There is originally this media that we brought in here, which is probably about 2.5 to 3 feet deep right in this area, down to the native soil. Was about a quarter, 20 to 25% permatil, and then a good topsoil that we brought in, just a sifted topsoil.
So would it work in our clay soil?
It should be fine and dandy, yeah. Yeah, it's tolerant of drier conditions. And is this one also alkalinity? I think it can also take an alkaline soil, which is not an issue here. But so for further west, they can see it like pardon? It can take our acidic soils, no problem. But for like places like in Texas, in the southwestern United States, where they do tend to have alkaline soils, it could have a major benefit for being able to grow it there. So, any other questions?
Can you buy it anyway?
Offhand, I don't know. Maybe Mr. Maple. It's not going to be at your local garden center at this point. It's going to be at a specialty nursery you'd probably find online. Like I said, Mr. Maple, and who knows, it's going to be a less common one. But fast growing, so you don't have to start with a big tree like you see at the garden center that's already 8 to 10 feet tall sometimes, and it has a 40 gallon pot on it. I mean, start small, it's easier. It's fast growing, you don't have to wait. Any others? So I'm going to have you just turn around. Our next plant is straight ahead, the yellow one straight ahead of us. So that is Acer negundo, winter lightning. So as you can see, I hacked it back a couple years ago. It was quite large, but this one, the foliage looks nice at this time of the year. It's very typical of Acer negundo. Which is our box elders, and is native. And this was actually a collected, I'm assuming relatively local to here. This was collected by Pat McCracken. So what's darn? Treasures. Garden Treasures is his nursery just to the east of Raleigh. Pat found this years ago, and I think he grafted them initially, but they do root. But one of the features of this is it's a paler green even when it's actively growing, and then in this fall you get decent fall color with the yellow on that, and then in the winter you're going to start to see the stems turn bright yellow. That's part of the reason I gave it a major haircut a couple years ago, so that we get lots of young shoots up from the base. But it can be grown into a tree, and this will get 30, 40 feet tall easy, and it was about 30 feet tall when I chopped it down. But if you start small on this one, you can grow it as a cutback, kind of like you would some of the twig dogwoods or willows, and to get the young flush of shoots through the winter months. You get to look at that. Summer, you have this nice bright green, not a dark green, a bright green that kind of stands out in the landscape, and then you get good fall color as well. So it's really a 4-season plant. So that's why I selected this one. And also it was real close to my other maple here. But any selections about, or any questions about this selection here? For me, especially if you're going for the stems, I would do late winter, just before they're going to push. So end of February, March, first half of March is a great time when you're going to do any of those hard pruning backs projects. It's just before they've pushed up all the pushing up nutrients to force that new growth, and so they'll quickly recover. So if you're doing a hard pruning on a hedge, I like to do it then, or in this case, a major cutback to force this into a twig type growth instead of a actual tree. So the next plant on your list is number 3, right? That's the plant, right? Number 3. Euonymus carnosus. So this is one of the spindle trees. The more common ones, are burning bush, which was mentioned here just a moment ago, and they can be downright weedy. We do get a handful of seedlings on this, but not many, thank goodness. But this is one we've had for years. We don't have really good records on this plant, but this is Euonymus carnosus, and I really adore this specimen. It colors up every year consistently, and it looks great now, doesn't it? Yeah. This, I've seen it the end of December still looking this good. It holds the color for so long. The interest on this is great, though, just aside from the foliage color in the fall. In the spring, you get kind of creamy 4-petal flowers. They're kind of really waxy looking. And now, if you look among the leaves here, you're going to see the seed capsules, which are like this too, and they're kind of a pinky, fleshy color as well. And then the seed is popping out. There's a little arrow around the actual seed, and the seed is black. But these are pretty cool to look at, and they're as decoration, or they're decorative in their own right. So this one, like I said, we don't have records to this. This plant just appears in our records, but we don't have a source of where it came from. And I wish I looked it up a little while ago and couldn't find anything out about it. But the species, though, is supposedly, and that was varying. I'd look online. We have it as being from China, parts of China, Taiwan, and Japan. And I'd see some information saying, oh, it's from southern China, another would say northeast China, and then Taiwan, and then other than that, I didn't see the Japan. So we have it all combined, but anyways. It must have a fairly broad distribution. I saw reports that it's hardy to zone 5, so no problem with cold here. It does very well for us. And like I said, wonderful color on this over a very extended period. It does drop a few leaves here and there, but it holds us and it'll get redder than this. So keep an eye on this for the next several weeks. Yep.
Are the seeds something the birds like?
The birds would probably distribute them. Actually, I just threw that away. Or, birds will probably go after it. There's a little arrow, a little fleshy orange thing on there, and that's to attract the birds, and then so that they'll carry it away and drop the seed somewhere. You can probably find it if you search. And what I was seeing, they'd say this is a large shrub, small tree. And that's the other thing. I saw information, 10 to 15 feet, and others saying up to 20 to 30 feet on the species. So I'd say it's about 12 to 15. I'd say 15. But like I said, I don't know how old this is. It was moved here, I'm assuming, when they built the building here in about 2002, 2003, they put it there. So it was transplanted here. So apparently it did quite well. So any other questions?
What's a spindle tree? What is
I don't know what, actually I haven't looked that up for that. I'm assuming maybe let's say the wood was probably good for making spindles, maybe on, either maybe on wheels or on banisters or something like that, or a chair. I don't know. Okay. It might just be good. I guess spindles on maybe a chair, back of a chair. It might be good for that. I don't know. That's just a guess, common names. Yeah. And it's a historical thing, but you'll often see that. What do we actually have on here? Yeah, we have spindle tree. Fleshy flowered spindle tree. Yeah, burning bush tree, or burning tree. Let's say that. We can call it that. This one's always on fire in the fall. So Any other
What's
question?
it look like in the spring?
Just simple green, dark green leaves. It's very clean looking, and this one has never had any issues. A lot of times, knock on wood, you know, you get euonymus scale, and I've never seen it on this one. Which is a major problem on trees like euonymus europaeus, I think, which is another of the spindle trees, and it's pretty good size. You'll get scales, but I don't see that on here. But clean green leaves, and then the creamy, it's just a fleshy, creamy, greenish white flower. And they're 4 petals, they're about this big.
Is it showy at all?
They're not bad, and they're in clusters. Yeah, this one's not overly spectacular in flower, but it's not bad looking if you do find them. It's not as cool as another spindle tree we have in the Lath house, which the flowers on it are really cool, and the threads that hold down, and the resulting seed pods, which if you go in there, you can see that. But I don't think that one colors up as well, but anyways. Who has a tiny postage stamp the garden on now? Probably yes. So this is one that might work for you. So this is a traditional sugar maple. This is one called Barrett Cole, I think, right? Yeah, Barrett Cole. And it goes by Apollo, I think, is the trade name on this one. You might find it as. It's a compact sugar maple. Supposedly 10 by 30 ultimately after a very long time. This plant, I don't remember how big it was when I started working here, but I've been here almost 17 years, and it has not outgrown this space. So, and if to squeeze into a small landscape, if you want a traditional color of a sugar maple, this is one for you. Good characteristics in that, like I said, it's compact, 10 by 30, that is 30 feet tall, 10 feet wide. You can squeeze that into most any landscape. So it can be limbed up. It's slow growing. So, you know, you could limit up into here ultimately and have a small tree look instead of just a perfect column that we have now.
Has that been pruned?
No. Other than they pruned the oak away from it to give it a little bit more space. But no, there's been no true pruning done to that.
Is that peak color there?
That's probably pretty much peak. It might get a little bit better here in the next few days. I would expect probably with the warmth we're having, it's going to drop its leaves by the end of this week or next week. So you're seeing it at a great time right now. Any other quick questions? Yeah. Yes, it's fine and dandy. I mean, it's been here for, well, it's been here longer than I've been here.
It's with the brick
And with this brick, they say give it a good sun for best color, of course. You want to have it in full sun to light shade at best.
Because most sugar maples don't do well
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah. I mean, I've seen more than I thought. I mean, like I said, over here, there's a slew of them along the streets back here, but most of them have already lost their foliage. But they were really nice when they were at peak.
New Gardens has them in their middle of their parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of maples, it's like, we have maples over here. We have Acer freemanii and Acer rubrums over here. Rubrums is the traditional red maple, and freemanii is a cross between a silver maple and a red maple. And we actually have a silver maple over here. Silver maple, I have junky. They don't get good color at all. They have the one we have over there is a fine textured leafed one, but I didn't want to show you those. Partly, they are next to a parking lot. That's not the place to plant them. They are not recommending planting them along anywhere there is excessive amounts of concrete. They will tend to get scales. And I forget which one it is, but it might be, it's gloomy scales. They get gloomy scales, and it's partly due to the heat from the concrete or the hardscaping. So stick them back out in a large landscape, not anywhere near a parking lot. I have not noticed any scale on this, but I haven't looked and I'm not seeing any. Just glancing in here, and there can be very apparent on those actually over there. And they're only how far? 70 to 80 feet away. And this doesn't have them, and that does. So I think the sugar maples are actually a little bit more tolerant to those scales than the reds and Freeman hybrids. That would be saccharinum instead of saccharum. There's an extra syllable in it. And I don't have that on this list. So, but there's one over there, Borns graciosa or Borns gracious, I don't remember which name we have on it, which is a cut-leafed one. It's much more slow growing. Back home in Pennsylvania, we have one that's about 90 some years old in the front of the house, and it's probably about that big around. My brother and I had them in his property. I think they've all fallen down now, or he's taken them down, because they were like this big. On the shallow topsoil that they have in Iowa, they don't get real big very quickly, and they just get hollow. You know, they only get 100 feet tall and have trunks that big. But they are not pretty trees. They don't color up much. They get a little bit yellow and then they fall off. On the silver maples. So that's actually probably good where you guys are at. Our next plant is Sassafras tzumu. And I think I said that right. I didn't even give myself notes on this one. This is for the longest time, they only said there was one species of sassafras. There was our American one, and then Asian forms of the American one, more or less, albitum. But they've split it out into a couple other species in Asia now. And this is one of them. And this is actually one of my favorite trees through at least 3 seasons of the year. And the fall is a good one. It's not as good a color, though, as our traditional native Sassafras albitum, which gets spectacular oranges and yellow tones to it, and a little bit of purple sometime. It does color up decently, though, but what I like about this is that our native one doesn't have is its habit. It doesn't sucker everywhere, which is a lot easier to use in a landscape as a result. Our native one, you'll get colonies is how they normally form in the in the wild. You'll get a little forest of them, and they'll all be clonal. So this doesn't do that. You'll get one tree, and it stays in its place where it's supposed to, and again, in our smaller landscapes today, is a good thing. But anyways, this is one, it's coloring up decently now, but like I said, it's not as spectacular as the native, but that trade-off is right there. It's easier to use in your landscape. But I also love this, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, or Doug or Mark or myself have talked about this plant at other times. In February, late February and early March, when it comes into flower, it's literally covered with little chandelier-like inflorescence. It actually has buds forming right now. This is the flower buds for next spring or late winter. And it's earlier flowering than our native, and it's much more spectacular in flower than our native. But you still get a layered appearance on these long-term, if you've seen a mature sassafras, which they can get quite large, and they have these, I don't know, they have layers to them, and they tend to be flat-topped when they're mature. Supposedly, this species can get up to like 90 to almost 100 feet tall. I don't know how long that takes. Our plant has been here since 2003. And we do get seeds now on it, which is great because most people, it's not one, we've tried rooting it, you can't root it reliably. If you do get it to root, it's a very weak root system. So seed is probably the easiest or best way to propagate them. And I've found that you can't let the seed get ever dry out, or because someone gave us a whole bunch of, a couple times, and not a single one germinated because the seed had dried out. If I let them rot in a jar in the refrigerator and then sow them, I get really good germination. The birds do move the seeds around a little bit, though I have only ever had a handful of seedlings come up in here, so hasn't been any major problem by any means. But I really like this plant for its habit and both its spring and fall color on that. So, any questions? Yep. It's apparently self-fertile, and that was one thing I wondered when I first saw it setting fruit. I thought, is it going to be viable? Because I think our native one might be dioecious. I'm not 100% on that, meaning you need a boy and a girl. And this apparently has set fruit quite well, and it flowers before our native one, so it's not outcrossing. So. And there aren't any real good populations of sassafras right around here to outcross with. So. The bees, does it make fruit? Yes, it does.
And so, like, do the birds and pollinators like it?
The bees are on this because it's open in February and March, 1st of March, and there will be bees all over it. And I've got pictures with bees and stuff on them, so yeah.
And does it make fruit?
Yes, yeah. I have to get the fruit. I think I have some in the refrigerator I need to sow, actually. I have to get them before the birds do, because they do disappear, yeah. They're a little black fruit. It's like, it's in the Lauraceae, so the laurel family, which also includes avocado. And it's kind of little bitty avocado. Or if you've seen our native Persia bourbonia, which is even closer related to avocado because Persia americana is the common avocado. It looks like just a very similar fruit. Okay, our next one is a little bit of, we're gonna watch this tree, but I'm thinking, we're hoping this one has good color. This is one that we're kind of experimenting with. It's this redbud of all things over here. Our native redbuds are dogs as far as I'm concerned when it comes to color. There's a little one over here. I mean, they get really ugly. The foliage gets really nasty by late in the season, even though they are native. You might want to actually, yeah, you guys stay down there for the most part because we are ultimately going that way. So, but if you look at the foliage on this is Cercis chuniana, which is a relatively new species. And oh, look, for fantastic foliage, I also had a fantastic knoll. Had good color, bright green. But the foliage on this is a bit different. It's very leathery if you get up here. It's not, it doesn't have the same texture as our native redbuds. So it seems to be pretty resistant to major disease on it. But some of the early leaves, you're starting to see change color. We had one, a small one in the nursery. We might still have it hiding down there somewhere, but it is colored up really well. You know, it was only a plant this big and it was spectacular fluorescent orange and yellow. Much like the sassafras do in the wild or sugar maple colors. So this is one we're really starting to watch in hopes that it will have good flower color. This is another unique redbud in that this has chains of flowers, not like our native redbuds that have these clusters right along the stems. These will get chains that are about 2.5 to 3 inches long, and they color change. They'll come out and they're almost white and they fade to pink. So you get this bicolor effect on it. It's really cool. But like I said, I'm watching it for color and I hope you guys will watch this one as well. It's in a really prominent place here. The other thing about this species is the range in size. Apparently this can get quite large. It ranges from 6 meters, which really that's probably comparable to our native redbuds for size, but up to, so that's like 18 feet or 20 feet roughly. But this one can get up like 90, if I remember correctly. Did I write? Yeah, up to 90 feet. Could you imagine a redbud 90 feet tall here in the spring and then, or in the fall in this case, with spectacular orange and yellow foliage on the, we're really curious to see what this does. This has only been here for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 now. So this is Cercis chuniana. But we're going to talk about this lovely tree, right? That redbud there that, like I said, has already lost all its leaves. No, we're going to talk about this Parotia subaqualis behind me. It has terrible color. What do you think? And it actually had a lot more leaves yesterday with the heavy rain last night. It did lose a good portion of its leaves. But this has been coloring up again probably since September. So again, a long duration of foliar color interest, that is, aside from green, since it has green leaves for most of the season, and then, of course, we have the fall color. This is a really cool plant. It's, I didn't look up the specifics on the dates, but it's quite rare. They found it growing in eastern China. The second species, there's 2 species of Parotia. There's Parotia persica. So anybody know where that one might be from? Persica, which we're going to see later on, actually. Yeah, Western Asia. And this is from China. It's a disjunct species, more or less. They're found at opposite ends of Asia. And for a while, I think they classified it maybe as a hamamelis. It went through a few different names, and then they finally said, oh, this is actually a Parotia. And it does color like a Parotia. The flowers are very much like a Parotia. And if you see them actually, probably in February, it comes into flower. They aren't spectacular unless you get right up to them, which are kind of cool. They're apetalous and little dangly things. But now it's in its glory. This was, let's see, this was planted here in 2009. When we started the Asian Valley. And so it's grown quite a bit. It was, again, small. We had it in the nursery and I tortured it a few times. It died back a few times in the pot. didn't care. Once it got in the ground, it took off. It's been a great plant. I don't know, do any of you guys remember Bob Lyons? The former director here, he posts on Facebook and I see his posting. He's been oohing and awing about, he has one at home too in southeastern Pennsylvania, and it's been having wonderful color as well. It looks much better than its cousins, the witch hazels and the coreopsis for fall foliage, but both species of Parotia are known for their great color, and this is just outstanding on how it glows, and the light is hitting it perfectly today. So we really lucked out on this one. Like I said, holding in November. Yeah, I didn't put too much about this, but
Is it multi-trunk?
we have low branching, and a lot of your Parotias typically are grown for multi-trunk. If you want, we can. And in small numbers, you can actually get up here. You just have to watch your step. There is a little trail. There's a light here, so it does. Oh, and there's a light here that I'm tripping over as well. It has the bark on it is actually quite attractive if you get right up to it. But watch out for the lights. It's just starting to get some exfoliation on it at this age. You get some patches here, which is very characteristic of Parotia. And we can root this one, which is great. So yeah, it has good bark to go with spectacular foliage. And growing it as a multi-trunked small tree is perfect whenever it has good bark. So that single trunk might not have the same impact. Yep.
Ultimate height?
I don't know. We've had it here for about 13 years. So, and we're about maybe 20 feet. I'm going to guess 30 to 40 feet long term, but I don't know offhand. But it's only been, named probably for the last, since, I don't know if it was the 80s or 90s. So it hasn't been around for very long in the world of horticulture. I think so. At least the foliage on that is the highest peak, or the highest interest on that. But if you were right up to it through the winter, you'll be able to see the bark. It has decent bark, as we were just looking at up there. And in late winter, you'll get some wispy flowers, but you have to really look for them. They're wind pollinated. So the next plant is right there. And it's probably been talked about so many times here, but we'll just talk about it as Ginkgo biloba in general. But this is also just a cool cultivar called Tschi Tschi. Ginkgos, we all know, spectacular yellow foliage, and we're just a couple weeks out, or probably a week out from that is my guess. They turn bright yellow and then they drop all at once. So you have to see them when they're in their glory. We're starting to get a few leaves falling now, but it will be a butter yellow pretty soon. And it will be spectacular. This is always a fun one, this specific selection here. This is Tschi Tschi, and after the foliage falls, but you can see it now too. You can see why it's called Tschi Tschi, which Tschi Tschi means breasts. It's a boy though, but the characteristic of breast forming or Tschi Tschi's forming on ginkgos is typically something that's found on very old plants, not on relatively young plants. And if you we're going to go up this trail here anyway, so if you come over here, you'll easily be able to see these Tschi Tschis on Tschi Tschi. So it looks kind of like wax dripping off these. This is an old a characteristic, like I said, of old plants, hundreds of year old, not of plants that are young. But this one has a hormonal issue and forms at a young age. And they're more or less, pardon? From what I understand, they're adventitious roots. So if the old plant kind of fall over and it might root in, is my guess or understanding of what it might be. For added support, But it does give it a really interesting look, especially after the leaves have fallen. But it'll be spectacular here up in the leaves will be spectacular here anytime now. Like I said, it's probably in the next couple of weeks, this will be at its peak color, and then we get to appreciate more the structure of the plant itself. Okay, and it's a boy, so he doesn't form the arils and with a seed in them, since they aren't fruit. But they are messy and smell. Though some find them they're very good for you apparently, memory-wise. So we're just gonna go up the little itty bitty path. So this is perfect that we have a relatively small group today. Yesterday, this was spectacular, and often, this is a crepe myrtle. And how many have crepe myrtles in your yard or on your property or wherever you live? Probably most of you have at least one, right? They don't always, color up real well due to so many of them have foliar issues. The indicas in particular, and this is an indica, but it was selected for its disease resistance. And it's also red flowered, which is not apparent at this time of the year, but when crepe myrtles don't get foliar issues, the foliage on them and lose their foliage in the summer, that is, their fall foliage can be quite spectacular. And as you can see on the remnants that are on this, it didn't get knocked off yesterday. This was actually pretty much full in leaf yesterday. I had to really blow this off this morning, and you can see the resulting leaves on the ground as well. You get the spectacular, again, oranges and reds and the yellows, hot tones, not cold tones on them. And it's right for me, I'm seeing the light come through those leaves. You guys are at a different angle. But as you walk through here, when we go to not the next plant, but the following plant, you will be able to better see the foliage here, especially against the blue sky. But crepe myrtles are something that are consistent for us here, readily available. So this is one, it's Whit IV, Red Rocket's the trade name for this one. And it's an upright one again. So easier maybe to fit in your landscape again, because it's gonna have a smaller footprint than say, if you planted Fantasy or Townhouse here, which are our fareis that literally would take up your whole property, crepe myrtle wise. And it's not the small growing ones either that are more shrubby. This is an upright, supposedly, I saw varying heights on this, 15 by 15, and then it's upright, and then I see others, it's 10 to 15 feet wide and 20 to 25 feet tall. And I'm guessing that's more of the range where it's actually the true to type, because these were planted here in 2007. And I'd say they're at least 18 to 20 feet tall right now. So they will grow a little bit more. And it does have a relatively thin profile. It's not one that's gonna spread out and take up your whole yard again. And it's, like I said, it has decent disease resistance to the foliage. So again, that foliage holds. So many, I even walked through the ones in the garden and I see in August and they're defoliated. This one is clean and has foliage the whole season to change in the fall. Also in the spring with this one, it's noted again to have the red new flush to the growth. So it comes out dark red. So, it's another added bonus to fabulous foliage on this one here. But great bark and contrast. This isn't the cinnamon and red tones that you get in the farii and the farii hybrids, but for the indicas, it's more of the tan tones. And it does really stand out really well against that burning foliage colors. Any questions about this in general? Okay, we don't always select our crepe myrtles for fall foliage, though. If you do some research and don't buy just the first one you see, you might be able to find something that has some better characteristics for the fall like this. So that's why I included this one. So our next plant is this one right here. So this is Taxodium distichum, Cody's feather, also known as Worcester's broom. I didn't find out exactly where the guy was from who selected it, but the guy's name was Bill Barger, and his son's name was, what do you think his son's name was? Cody. So it's named after Bill Barger's son, Cody. It is a compact or dwarf bald cypress. This was originally on a standard, which you can still see down here, the bark change here, and it was about this tall when I planted it in 2007. It only gets some stuff online was saying 4x4. Yeah, I think it's 4x4, right? And then I saw others that say after 10 years, 8 to 10 feet. This is about, what is that, 15 or 16 years in the ground here. It's gotten a little bit bigger than that. A lot of this information comes out of the Northeast where their summers are a lot shorter. So I do take that into account that are larger size here. But still, it is much more compact than a traditional bald cypress. What plant am I looking at right now? But I like the colors, the bronze tones, the coppery bronze tones that the foliage takes on in the fall on our bald cypress here. Not just this one here, but any of the bald cypress typically have a really nice fall color. If you look at them, whether they're growing on a swamp here on the coastal plain or in a landscape, they're planted on street trees here in Raleigh, they will color up evenly. Someone asked me, is there something that, I think you asked me, was it about the evenness of color? On some things. And to me, bald cypress are pretty consistent. You can guarantee almost that you're going to have a nice fall color, and it's going to be these bronzy tones of browns and cinnamons, and it just, the whole tree will turn that color before the needles drop. And so they can make a statement in that. They don't have to all be fresh. I will say with these compact ones like this, they do tend to hold their needles a bit in bunches, which I don't like as much as a traditional bald cypress, that they don't get caught up in all the branchlets and stuff. So they don't clean out as well on their own. So, but it does color up like a traditional bald cypress. It'll ultimately color up. Actually, some forms of bald cypress, the southern forms, which they used to separate them into their different species, the Montezuma cypress, which right now I can't tell you what they're calling it. It's a Taxodium distichum variety or subspecies. I can't remember, something else now. But they're actually semi-evergreen to evergreen. So it's the oldest needles that are coloring first here, and then the younger needles color last in this case. So, and so it's not going backwards; it's going forwards. But it will ultimately become an even color, which is nice. The natural range for Taxodium distichum, which in the central part of the country, you'll get pond cypress, which is now lumped into that Distichum imbricatum. They'll go into zones, probably zone 5, zone 6 in the wild. So, yeah. So, a few minutes ago, of course, we saw the Parotia subequalis in Asian Valley. This is its cousin, which is much more common than that. This is Parotia persica in this cultivar called Burgundy. They are known for having good fall color as well. It's just beginning to color up. I'm hoping the next few weeks we'll have some good color on this, but you'll get oranges and yellows again on this, and some red tones and burgundy to purpley tones on it when it does color up. But not everybody colors at the same rate. So actually going back to that ginkgo, just down the street, I noticed yesterday, I was driving down the street, and there's a ginkgo down at the I-beam building, and they're in full color. And ours are all green, as that ginkgo is right back there too. So they all change at their own rates. But anyways, this is one to keep an eye on over the next few weeks. It tends to color up pretty well, and you're starting to see some color. It would probably be better if I didn't have the hedge on the south side of it, and it would got full sun on this side instead. This is the north side, so it doesn't color as bright as it could. But Parotia persica is still known for having excellent fall color on that one. So Burgundy is one that supposedly it can have a burgundy flush to the foliage in the spring as well. That's where the burgundy comes in. So, but again, it has good foliage through the summer, and the structure, again, Parotias are typically grown multi-trunked, and you can see this has, I've even tried thinning this thing over the years. It has a bunch of trunks, but it's just starting to get some of the patterning on it. It will get patterning as it ages. That'll start to flake away. Down at the roots, there's actually the only part that's really starting to show on here. But mature Parotias are known for spectacular bark as well as great fall foliage on it in that. And they're called Ironwoods pretty often. So Any questions about this plant? They're easygoing. Again, this is these are witch hazel relatives, so the flowers aren't overly spectacular. They aren't anywhere near as spectacular as a witch hazel, but they're just these wispy things in the late winter. Hearing no questions, we might go to our final plant, which is right there. It's starting to color up, and I believe I've had good years on this, and not every year. This is, if I can spit its name out, Carpinus Turksanoii, which online I see some spectacular pictures as bonsais. So Blake would like this one. Even red, a russet red, brick red on a lot of these times. Ours tends to turn more yellow, but it's starting to change right now. And I just wanted to show you something a little different, one that you might not think of. And there's we have one of our native Carpinus that we have a selection of that we got a couple years ago, and it's just getting established way on the other side of the garden. And it had orange and red tones. It's already gone leafless for the most part, just in the last few days. But Carpinus in general, we don't always think of as great fall color, but this one's supposed to have good fall color, as well as some forms of our own native ones, which grow in the woods here in Raleigh, as an understory. And so they're kind of an understatement when they're in the not getting a lot of sun to their leaves. They tend just to turn yellows and you don't pay attention to them. But if they are giving full sun, you can get some orange and red tones and yellows all blending together again. And they're really versatile trees. But this one, I don't have any pictures. I even looked in our photo collection of it in the fall, or for fall foliage, but we don't have any. We have 7 photos of it right now. But this was moved here in, I think, 2002-ish. And we grew it from seed in '94, actually. It was actually a fairly good sized tree when it was moved here. But it's done very well. It is starting to color up now, and it lost a lot of leaves last night in the heavy downpour. So I don't know what those would have turned into, but it is taking on yellow tones right now, but supposedly it gets nice red, and the pictures I saw online were really nice red tones. So.